In February 1943, 21-year-old Sophie Scholl stood before Judge Roland Freisler. Just hours later, she was dead. Her crime? Distributing anti-Nazi leaflets. Sophie Scholl wasn't the only one. Freisler sentenced over 5,000 people to death during his career. This is the story of how Freisler became Germany's most feared judge and one of the most notorious legal figures in history. Roland Freisler began his legal career with no sign of the brutality to come. He enrolled at the University of Jena in 1912 to study law, excelling in legal theory and constitutional law. But in 1914, his studies were cut short when he was drafted into the German army at the outbreak of World War I. While serving in the military, Freisler experienced a pivotal moment in his ideological development. Captured by Russian forces in 1915, he spent the rest of the war in a Siberian prison camp. There, he encountered Marxist revolutionary ideas that left a lasting impression. Though he later rejected communism, his writings reveal an admiration for its structure, discipline, and revolutionary energy. After returning to Germany in 1918, Freisler resumed his legal education. He earned his doctorate in 1920 with a dissertation on maritime law that received high distinction. Early in his career, Freisler defended the rights of the accused and warned against judicial overreach. In a 1921 article, he emphasized the importance of impartiality, writing, "Judges should resist the temptation to decide cases based on personal impressions rather than evidence." Freisler established himself as a defense attorney in Kassel during the early 1920s. Colleagues remembered him as a meticulous lawyer who often won acquittals through technical legal arguments. The turning point came in 1925 when Freisler joined the Nazi Party. Former colleagues noted an immediate change in his behavior and legal philosophy. Where he had once emphasized procedural fairness, he now called for national renewal through radical legal reforms. His writings began to prioritize the health of the folk over individual rights, a stark departure from his earlier ideals. By 1930, Freisler had left private practice behind to work full-time for the Nazi Party. He used his legal training to draft party legislation and justify extrajudicial actions. His transformation from principled lawyer to ideological enforcer was complete, and the foundation was set for the destruction of Germany's justice system. As State Secretary in the Reich Ministry of Justice from 1934, Roland Freisler began systematically dismantling Germany's legal protections. One of his first major acts was helping craft the 1935 Nuremberg Laws. These defined Jewish identity and outlawed relationships between Jews and non-Jews, all using Freisler's precise legal language. He argued that German judges could recognize Jews the same way US judges identified black people, despite the total absence of legal criteria. In 1939, Freisler introduced the Juvenile Felons Decree, allowing courts to sentence minors to death, a first in German legal history. At least 72 young people were executed under this law, including 17-year-old Helmut Hübner, hanged in 1942 for distributing anti-war leaflets. Freisler defended these executions by declaring, "In times of war, breaches of loyalty and baseness cannot find any leniency and must be met with the full force of the law." Freisler also targeted Jewish and Romani children. In 1935, he proposed labeling them legally incompetent, allowing the state to remove them from their families without due process. Freisler's court rulings introduced pseudo-scientific terms like perpetrator type and national parasite, embedding racial ideology directly into the language of German law. By 1938, as head of the Penal Law Division, Freisler had overseen the removal of over 2,000 Jewish judges and lawyers. In 1941, he ordered yellow badges for all Jewish prisoners in Reich prisons. Working with regional Nazi leaders, Freisler standardized death penalties for Jews and Poles in occupied territories, applying them even to deportees en route to the east. Freisler's doctrine of judge's instinct instructed courts to rely on racial intuition instead of evidence. In one case, he overturned an acquittal by stating, "The defendant's appearance alone proves his guilt." He redefined terms like high treason, enabling death sentences for trivial acts, even anti-Nazi jokes. By 1939, Freisler had replaced centuries of legal tradition with racial ideology. The courtroom had become a weapon, paving the way for wartime atrocities. Roland Freisler's appointment as president of the People's Court in August 1942 turned the institution into a courtroom designed for execution. The courtroom, draped in scarlet swastika banners, became a stage for terror. Clad in a blood-red judicial robe, Freisler created a chilling spectacle meant to crush defendants' spirits before a word was spoken. The setting was no accident. It was a display of Nazi power designed to instill fear and submission. Under Freisler's rule, the court became ruthlessly efficient. Trials, often reduced to 15-minute formalities, ended with predetermined death sentences. Freisler personally led the First Senate, which issued 2,600 death sentences, more than all other divisions combined since 1934. Execution rates soared from 40 to 90%, with Freisler reviewing each case himself. In some instances, he even dictated the method of death, preferring piano wire for those he wanted to suffer. Freisler's interrogations were infamous for their psychological cruelty. He shifted between cold, calculated questions and explosive tirades, sometimes screaming until his voice gave out. These courtroom performances weren't just aggressive, they were acts of dehumanization, designed to break the accused before the sentence was even read. Freisler's courtroom was also a propaganda machine. Selected trials were filmed with microphones amplifying Freisler's shouts and the defendant's stammers. Edited footage emphasized humiliation, while court artists exaggerated degenerate features in sketches for Nazi newspapers. The July 20th plot trials were especially exploited, showcasing only the most degrading moments to reinforce Nazi power. By 1944, the People's Court had become a mechanized killing machine. Freisler presided over as many as 60 cases per day and maintained a 90% conviction rate. His system of flying justice epitomized the Nazi regime's cold, industrialized approach to murder by law. The White Rose trial became one of Roland Freisler's most infamous moments, a brutal display of how he silenced dissent. On February 18, 1943, the Gestapo arrested Sophie and Hans Scholl, along with Christoph Probst, for distributing anti-Nazi leaflets. Freisler was dispatched from Berlin. He arrived in Munich 4 days later, determined to make an example of them. He scheduled the trial for a Saturday, ensuring the public, especially students and workers, could watch. Freisler's conduct during the trial was a masterclass in psychological domination. He interrupted Sophie Scholl 84 times, shouting her down every time she tried to explain their motives. At one point, Freisler even hurled the penal code toward the defendants, forcing them to duck, a chilling snapshot of his theatrical cruelty. The outcome had been decided before the trial even began. Execution orders were signed in advance, and the verdict included the confiscation of the Scholl family's property. The students were originally sentenced to be hanged, but the method was changed to guillotine to avoid creating martyrs. Later, guillotine operators revealed that Freisler timed executions between his lunch breaks, treating death like a clerical task. Freisler saw educated youth as a unique threat, their ideas, their voice, their potential to inspire rebellion. The White Rose leaflets had circulated widely. They exposed Nazi atrocities and called for non-violent resistance, making the group a top target. At the second White Rose trial on April 19, 1943, Freisler opened by declaring, "National Socialism does not need a criminal code against such traitors as you are. I will make this process with you short." The trial lasted less than a day. It ended with 3 more death sentences and 9 prison terms. The Scholl siblings were executed just hours after their trial. Witnesses recalled their calm composure with their final words, "Long live freedom." Freisler's handling of the White Rose cases wasn't justice, it was terror in a red robe. The clearest example of how the courtroom became a weapon. The July 20th plot trials, held in August 1944, became Roland Freisler's most elaborate performance of judicial terror. The proceedings were filmed for nationwide broadcast. Cameras were carefully positioned to capture every moment of humiliation. Freisler transformed the courtroom into a propaganda set, complete with theatrical lighting and amplified microphones. His tirades boomed through the speakers, while defendants' stutters and silences were magnified for effect. Freisler meticulously staged the defendants' appearance. They were forced to wear shabby, ill-fitting clothes, often without belts or suspenders. Field Marshal Erwin von Witzleben had to hold up his trousers with one hand while Freisler screamed accusations at him. Prison staff reportedly denied him bathroom breaks. Like von Witzleben, other defendants were made to look messy and defeated, as if the trial had already decided their guilt. The trials followed a strict choreography, crafted to break the accused. Freisler interrupted them hundreds of times, shouting insults like, "You really are a lousy piece of trash." Microphones captured every stammer and hesitation. Nazi radio later edited these recordings to amplify guilt and shame. Court transcripts even recorded multiple instances of defendants vomiting from stress, a chilling testament to the torment they endured. Freisler personally oversaw the editing of trial footage, selecting only the most degrading moments for broadcast. Close-ups showed defendants sweating, trembling, or fumbling for words, while any coherent defense was deliberately cut. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels praised the films as perfect demonstrations of the people's justice. using them to reinforce the Nazi regime's narrative of strength and order. Execution orders were crafted with calculated cruelty. Some sentences specified slow strangulation with piano wire. Afterward, the bodies of executed conspirators were hung from meat hooks in a Berlin warehouse, displayed like trophies. Freisler's involvement in the technical details revealed his deeper obsession, not just with punishment, but total domination. Behind the scenes, Freisler maintained tight control. He reviewed footage daily, even ordering reshoots to perfect the message. Edited trial highlights were distributed to factories, military units, and schools, turning executions into state-sponsored lessons in obedience. These trials were the Nazi regime's clearest example of how justice was turned into a weapon. On February 3, 1945, an Allied bomb struck Roland Freisler's courtroom in Berlin mid-session. He died clutching legal files as he tried to flee. Those papers belonged to Fabian von Schlabrendorf, a July 20th plot conspirator whose trial had just begun. Von Schlabrendorf had been in the courtroom just steps from Freisler when the blast hit. He was later retried, acquitted, and survived the war. Years later, he rose to become a judge on West Germany's highest court, a living symbol of how justice, once corrupted, could be reborn. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this video informative. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out our other video, What Happened to Hitler's Family After World War II. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more World War II content. And we'll see you in the next one.